All right, good evening, everyone. Oh, I can't do my film sometime here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Sammy Pearson. I'm the director of the library here in Coos Bay. And just some housekeeping business. There's some bathrooms right out here in the lobby. There's some water back there if you need anything. So just to give you just a real brief rundown, in case you didn't know or refresh your memory, Coos Bay Public Library is the largest library on the Oregon coast. And we have usually about, and I have to use usually about because of the way times are right now, about 300,000, roughly 300,000 visitors a year to the library. We circulate close to 250,000 physical items and about 20,000 digital items every year. We hold over 500 programs with usually about 5,000-ish people in attendance in those programs. So I just wanted to give you an idea of kind of what the library does in the community and just how much we do too. But at this time, I'd like to invite Mayor Benetti up here. He also has a few words, and then we'll introduce our architecture team and we'll get started and get your feedback, which I'm so appreciative to have everybody here. Thank you.
Well, welcome, everyone. Let's see. Can you hear me? Is this thing working? All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for attending. I just want to give you a little bit of background, and then we'll get the presentation on its way. So basically, this started in 2014, and we found out the foundation is failing. And so we've been dealing and wrangling with that and trying to determine how to resolve it. And so it was determined that there really was no resolve without major repair. So it would have taken $7 million in repairs. But after I made that statement this afternoon, one of the library steering committee said, well, it really can be more than that. Because if you start figuring, the other entity things that need to go into it, it's going to be much more. The HVAC and those type of things, all of a sudden you won't run into a lot more money. And on top of it, it would have to be set aside and closed for approximately 2 years. In my opinion, if we close this library for 2 years, we'd probably be closing it permanently. So what we decided to do, the library steering committee was appointed by the council in 2015, and they went out and looked at sites. And preferably, it was supposed to be located downtown, hopefully, and they looked for quite a while. And to no avail. It was going to take at least 2 acres, and we wanted to get it out of the tsunami inundation zone and the floodplain. And also it had to be in urban renewal. Someone today mentioned a piece of property that was outside the urban renewal and in the floodplain, so it wouldn't be generating or helping us in any case. We want this to be an evacuation place if it could be, and that would be beneficial. If we try to build down there, we're just going to run into more problems. We failed. So we looked around, and just like with the fire station, going back in time, the fire station was down by Old City Hall. And when we located it, we ran into the same issue. We wanted to make sure it was on the other side of 4th Street, out of the floodplain and tsunami zone. That was the reason that the fire station is placed where it's at on Elroy, specifically for that. I was in part of the process, and the council after me followed up and they finished that up. So with finding no site that would fit in the downtown area, even though that was the most popular site, it was decided to start looking out in Empire. And so that's where we ended up. We went and tried to figure out, try to buy guesses. We figured that we could make this a win-win for everyone. And this would be an anchor for Empire and help with the revitalization that we're doing out there. And so we tried to buy guesses, which was unable to happen. The owners were unwilling. We made multiple offers, multiple times. And so finally, we had to abandon that property. And so we bought a piece of property next to Graham Dodge, which used to be Vergers. And it's a little over 2 acres. And it would have worked. And we were going to move down that road. So Phil Marler, one of our counselors, council president at the time, also was an appraiser. And he started looking around, and he found a piece of property next to John Topits, 25 acres that was vacant, or a large piece that was sitting there. So we went out and talked to Mrs. Topits and asked her, because it had a deed restriction that the park had to be, this was donated, it had to be a park. And she stated that she thought the library was a great idea to put there, but she informed Phil, and we found out that that is not part of the John Topits Park that was donated. So she said we'd have to go somewhere else and look for to find out what's going on. So Phil did some checking, and when Empire became part of Coos Bay, that was part of Empire's property. So it became part of the city of Coos Bay property. So it was decided to go there. But, there was some discussion on the council whether they wanted to stay at Graham Dodge or go out to Empire, about the John Topits Park. And it was a split vote, but it was decided to go with John Topits. And so we moved forward there. And that's what has brought us to this point. And it's important that I feel that, we had some people talk, well, it's way out in Empire, and, the problem is that we're a city. I don't care if it's Empire East Side or Inglewood, we're a city, we're a community. And so it doesn't matter where it is. I think there's a lot of benefit to having it out there. I personally like it. I think being by the park's a good idea. We have an elementary school, we have a middle school, we have the college, and I understand that the college has a library. But I believe that this library that we are talking about now would be an added addition to the one that they have there. Also, as it came up in the presentation that you'll hear later on, a library is more than books. It's a center. It's a community place to go and be. And as Sammy mentioned, we have 300,000 visits there. Our district goes all the way out to Charleston. So it's important that, these people, Charleston, Empire, and even East Side, they come over and been using the downtown facility. But I think it's going to be just as popular and just as beneficial and do very well out there. So we're going to make the presentation. If you have more questions, please let me know. I'll talk to you individually, or I'll answer your questions to them after the presentation. So let's listen to these individuals. Hecker Architects also was involved in doing the needs assessment, and we liked them so much. I didn't personally, but the library steering committee did. They selected them to be the architects, and I think they've done a wonderful job. So I'll just listen to the presentation. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I'm Laura Klinger with Hacker Architects, and I am an architect, but my specialty is library design. It's not coming through. Start again. I'm Laura Klinger with Hacker Architects, and I'm an architect, but my specialty is library design. And I worked in 2016 on the needs assessment, and it was wonderful to get to know your community. And I'm just thrilled to be back to help bring the realization of this library to your community.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Pechtel at Hacker Architects. I'll be doing design assist on the library. I get to do a lot of the early conceptual work, iterations, explorations, a lot of visualizations to help bring some of these ideas to life. I'm really excited about this project as well.
Hi, I'm Carrie Waltz. I'm the project architect for this library. I like to describe my role as the nuts and bolts of the project. I bring all the pieces together and work with all the various consultants to help make it real. I've touched many sort of libraries at Hacker, and I'm really excited to be a part of this one with you.
Good evening, folks. My name is Charlie Brucker. I'm the project landscape architect with Place, and I've had the privilege of working on library projects and park projects for the last almost 30 years. And my role will be on the role of developing the site, everything outside of the building, traditional landscape and restoration, as well as amenities, access roads, and parking. Thank you.
Great, and we have one really important team member that is with us via Zoom. So David, you want to do an introduction?
Hi, everybody. I'm on this tiny little corner of the screen in the upper left or right, I think, in the council chambers. I am the design director at Hacker, and we're just thrilled at this. And we think, especially with the choice that your community has made to make this library part of the park, that is really connecting you to your place, this natural place in the world that is really unique to you. We're thrilled. So thanks for having us. And I'm sorry I couldn't be down there in person today. My family is dealing with some of the kind of pandemic protocols that are required right now. So hopefully next time I can be down there in person.
Great. So just to start, Hacker is an architecture firm out of Portland, Oregon. And one of our specialties, one of our core project types is libraries. And we've been working on them for about 35 years, and particularly community libraries. So sort of 10,000 to 30,000 square feet, where we can really come to communities and really get to know them and get to know the place where the library exists and really embed that into the library itself, the design. So that's what we hope to do with your project. And it's one of the reasons we feel that community input and meetings like this are so important to the design, because we want to hear from you before we start designing anything. So tonight, We haven't started any real library design per se, but we're focusing on right now is placing the library within the park. And that's what we'll be talking about towards the end of the presentation. So tonight, I'm just going to touch on the schedule for the project and the project goals, the criteria and priorities, and the building program. And David's going to dive into, well, actually, Charlie's going to talk about the existing site conditions, some of the study of just what we have with the park and the use analysis. And then David's going to talk about the 3 options for project location. And then we can talk about next steps. And we hope to, after the presentation, take a few questions, but really break up and talk to you individually at the boards and get your input on the various imagery and comments we have up. So as for schedule, there we go. We've been working since mid-December on this work, and we're just finishing up what we call the kind of vision programming stage. So we had done a program that outlines all the different spaces in the library in 2016, but we want to revisit that and make sure that it's still accurate and update it to make sure that it's current. And then we also did the site analysis and master planning. So really at the end of this phase, the sort of pink phase here, we want to place the library and we want to confirm that library program. And then we'll kick into schematic design, which is actually getting into the layout and the form of the library. And we'll have another community meeting probably mid to late February, where we'll come back and have some options for you to look at the actual design. And we'll be doing renderings and a cost analysis of that kind of midway. And then that will be the information that supports the bond measure, which will go out in May, is the plan. And then we'll complete the schematic design and make updates to the costs and renderings after that. And so we hope to be finished that work by, oh, is it? There we go, go really close. So we hope to be finished that work by early May. And then how that fits into the bigger picture, we're in this, what I'm calling phase 1, the yellow here. And so once we finish up in May, the project will go on hold until it figures out how you're getting funding. And then when we kick back in, when that's confirmed, there'll be about another 7 or 8 months of design when we develop it and we actually do construction documents, and then it goes to bid and probably a year of construction after that. And I'll pass it back to David for this one.
So when we started this project, there were a list of goals that we were provided by the steering committee, and we've expanded those to include all of the ones that you see here on the page. We know that in terms of the project costs, we want a really efficient library that is really direct about spending money in a way that really brings the kind of programs to Coos Bay that you so need. We want to make sure that the building we're providing you is going to ensure low cost over time, so that we have really low operating costs and low maintenance costs with the design. The second one is super important about park sensitivity and preservation. We know that the community really appreciates that park for what it is, and we want there to be, with the library being here, for both of them, the library and the park, to be stronger for that relationship. And to that end, we want to find ways to get shared use of the site. That can include parking, it can include the trails and playground. What can the library do for the park, and what can the park do for the library? Sustainability, we are looking at really energy efficient approaches that will generate long-term savings for the city. We want the building to be really healthy, to have really materials in there that guarantee good air quality, and mechanical systems that do the same. Great daylight, water efficiency, not just for low flow fixtures and things like that, but also stormwater and how we handle that in a really responsible way. We're wanting to find a way for this building to be a leader in terms of a low carbon footprint, possibly an all electric building in order to achieve that. So no fossil fuels. The other thing that's super important we understood to your community is how to make this a place that can perform as an evacuation center to help your whole community be more resilient. The library program itself, which Laura is going to touch on here, is incredibly innovative, kind of bringing all the functions to Coos Bay that you need and that current libraries are finding in this day and age it needs to do. and that the design itself should be a real reflection of who you are, be really beautiful, and enhance its surroundings, and defer to them and make them better for being there. And lastly, to be incredibly flexible for the future. And I think to that note, and I alluded to it in the introduction, is just we're so excited about, we know it's been really contentious for you to kind of arrive at this site, but just from our perspective, having worked on a lot of community libraries, it's very rare that a community gets a site of this quality to be able to be considered for their library. Its connection to the landscape, that is something that everyone in your community shares. That landscape has been central to your culture for millennia, for people in this area for millennia, was the reason the landscape and the land and fishing and logging and mining, all directly connected to it, are reasons why your community is there in the first place, and agriculture. And continues to be, those things continue to be central to the kind of social and economic identity of your region, and are expanding now to also, that connection to the land to also be something that people are now also seeing, not just as livelihood, but also as a way to be healthier, greater sense of well-being, recreation, and then also just being able to connect socially in the outdoors and strengthen your community through that connection. So all that said, we're really looking for a way through this design to create a library that is architecture that actually is invented from this natural place that you all share, one of the only things that your whole community shares, just like you all share this library.
So this is obviously way too small to see, but this is the updated building program. So all the different spaces that are planned for the library, and it adds up to about a 31,500 square foot building. And just, it's on one of the boards over there, so you can take a look at all the different spaces. But in general, we're planning a really separated children's area with a story time space and its own family bathroom, a separate teen space, which is one of the things that the library really lacks now. Lots of meeting space, so 2 small 2-person meeting rooms, 2 4-person meeting rooms, a 12-seat meeting room, a 24-person meeting room, and a community room that's twice the size of the one in the library now that can be divided into 2. Obviously, spaces for collection and seating for the adult area, area for growth of collection, and really making that flexible for the future. We're going to also have a Friends of the Library bookstore that's larger than the one they have now, and storage and workspace for that, as well as admin spaces and other support spaces. So that is an overview of the program. And then, as I said, we haven't really started any design work. But what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about some of the things that we will be thinking about when we start to design the spaces in the library. And so I'm going to show you some images. Most of it's from Hacker's work, but some from other architects to illustrate some of the thinking that we'll bring to the project. First, and Joe touched on it, libraries are a lot more than just what they contain, the books, and they're more about spaces for people to be in, and for programs to exist, and for people to engage with information in a variety of ways. So it's really important that the buildings are welcoming to everyone in the community, no matter what your life experience, no matter if you're having the worst day of your life or the best day of your life. We want them to be comfortable and supportive for everyone in the community. Also, when we look at libraries, a lot of the older ones, especially from the 50s and 60s, were really bunker-like, very inward focusing, not a lot of windows. And so one of the things we always want to do in our new libraries is really be extroverted to the community, not introverted. So be able to, from one inside the building, connect out. And whether that's in an urban setting or the park setting, really connect with your environment. And also then people outside the library can see into the library and all the action and stuff going on. So really be an attractor. This is a library that David and Carrie and Nick and I worked on that opened in south of Portland, that's actually in a park on a wetland. So very similar. And we really stitched it in to honor that place. And David, my throat's going a little bit, so maybe you want to take over.
Yeah, you bet. I will try to live up to Laura's reputation here. So I think the other thing is the ability, not just for being able to kind of see nature and connect to it, to the outdoors that way, but I think especially on your site here, we're looking for ways that the library itself can connect to the outdoors, where people that are inside are invited to kind of go out and explore the site. Also, other ways of connecting just internally, like there are so many more kinds of events now that happen at libraries. Everything from impromptu concerts to literally people sometimes are getting married in them, to art shows and galleries. We want to make space that can accommodate that kind of variety and really anything that your community can dream up. We are looking at the library also as a vehicle for education around sustainability. There will be sustainable strategies this building will pursue, and we like to find ways to actually have the building be a demonstration of those. So when people come, whether it's solar panels or green roofs, that there are, they come out there and they leave with a deeper understanding of sustainable practices in building. Libraries are also these places. They're not just about coming to get books, like Laura said. It's also you come there to go and do things, either on your own or with friends and colleagues. Whether it's literally making, where you're actually doing projects and crafts and things like that, or if you're putting out your own podcast. The kid spaces are really one of our most favorite things to kind of get engaged with. We like that kids learn as much through moving and play and involving their bodies in kind of learning. And so we like to make kid spaces that are really active, where they can not just engage their minds, but their physical selves. And then we also want to acknowledge that we also try to make them really great places for adults too, because kids rarely this little show up there on their own. So we try to make it really great for everybody. The teen spaces, they need their own space. They're at that point where they've kind of had enough of adults, and they're out of the kid space and they want their own. And so we try to make spaces where they get to feel that kind of ownership over it, where they can move the furniture around, they can make their own kind of setups, and also have a variety where they can be meeting with one another one-on-one or by themselves or in a big group playing video games. We like to separate them acoustically, but we like to keep them visually kind of in sight, so you can kind of just make sure everything going on in there is the right thing to be going on. Also, all of that innovation is not at the expense of what libraries have always been, which is places to be quiet and get focus. In the upper right is just an example. Sometimes it's just where we locate those kind of quiet spaces. Often we like to put them kind of toward the ends of a space where you don't have people moving through them. It's a destination, and you can go there and it's quiet and focused like your traditional library would be. We also like to provide smaller spaces that can sometimes be for one or two people, that you can just kind of pop into and have a quiet conversation on a cell phone if you need to, or nowadays, on a laptop over Zoom. And that's not just for one or two people, but a variety of meeting sizes. With the pandemic and whatnot, the demand has gone up on libraries to provide this kind of space. People are doing a lot of working from home, and having a place in their community where they can go and have be able to actually participate in a digital meeting is something that libraries can provide. And also just understanding how service is provided. The traditional help desk is kind of really getting rethought in a lot of ways. The librarian isn't trapped behind that now. They're actually able to kind of be out and be guides to help you filter all the information that's out there. We don't have a problem getting our hands on information these days. It's figuring out what information we should listen to and pay attention to. Also, within the opportunity, another opportunity within the library is to think about how we can really celebrate things that are unique to your culture. This is a community on the East Coast that was a fishing, focused community, and so we actually, the architect in this case actually incorporated a basket, a fishing collection basket, to actually enclose their kind of heritage collection. That tracked all the genealogy for people in the community. And so thinking about special opportunities, understanding what's important to you and the identity of your community, and finding ways to integrate that into the architecture of the library. Making it adaptable. this is a library in San Francisco we did where it was tight on space. And so we actually provided a wall that could open up to the kids' room so that a meeting space, if you wanted a really big public meeting space, we put all the kids' bookshelves on casters. So you could roll them aside and you could actually double the size of the meeting space if you wanted to. And we also want to make sure our libraries are prepared for the future. We don't know what's coming. That's one thing we've learned over the last couple of decades. And so making sure in terms of how they accommodate technology and being able to have movable furniture and things like that is really important. And thinking about what we actually build permanently about the library as being responsive to the things that we always want to be true. Good daylight, beautiful materials, open, flexible space.
Okay, Charlie.
Hi, folks. So does everyone know where the Topits Park is, right? So we don't have to go through that. The thing that we want to impress upon everyone is that we feel very good about where it's located and what those resources are that are coming to bear within the park and around the community. And so if we think about the site and what's available to the people in the community, and also bringing it to the Empire area, there's a good density of folks that live there. And so as the mayor acknowledged earlier, it's not about being downtown or in Empire, or what have you. It's in Coos Bay. And so we think there's some advantages to this relocation from that fact as well. When we think about the specific site, if you think about Topits Park, what is the first thing you think about? It's the trees and the lakes themselves and just this abundance of nature. And we want to impress upon you that as the design team and the library team thinks about the site, we're very cognizant of that sensitive quality and the fact that we need to create a blended condition. It's not an imposition, but it's really the two working together and that mutually beneficial quality that can come from this. So we're very much aware of how that is coming to bear. So we've all been there. We've all appreciated the wonderful qualities of the site and the trails and the views and the vistas. And as we think about where the building and these amenities can go, we're taking into consideration that existing fabric, the existing networks, both from an ecological standpoint and also from our cultural standpoint. The other really special thing about the site is its scale. So we know that the parcel that we're working with is about 20 acres, or the available land is about 20 acres. It has that flexibility, but really the park is much, much vaster, much larger. And as we think about going into the park, you can imagine walking down that trail and leaving kind of the pressure of life behind and engaging nature. And we're thinking about that as these contours of immersion. So as you move into the park, you become more immersed. And that's a factor that we're thinking about and we're considering as we view these potential development sites, so that wherever we place the library, we are not compromising the quality of that immersive experience, but at the same time, people that are using the library get to enjoy some of that immersive experience. So finding that delicate balance is part of our exploration. And of course, it's views into the park, but also views out of the park that will contribute to that balance. So if we acknowledge how people move through the park, this, if we think about it from outwards in, the dashed line represents your county shuttle system, transit system. Currently does not stop here in Newmark, but the library has is engaged in conversations with them, and they're interested in the idea of adding a stop here at Hull or in Newman to be able to allow that added benefit of getting people here to the park. So it benefits the park and it benefits the library. The Ks are kiosks for entry kiosks, and then those paved paths and trails that you're so familiar with. If we put ourselves in a private vehicle, there really are 3 points of access to the park that influence our conversations. And if we go from left to right or from the west, the first one there at at Newman, am I remembering that correctly? Newmark, thank you, is a four-way interchange. So it's a robust interchange, and it leads down into the Armory site. If we go east to Hull, which is the main entrance into the park, it's offset a little bit and does not have a signal. And it's a little bit more of a challenge, on a busy day to be able to turn to the east out of that or to turn into that. And so there'll be some conversation about how that gets developed. And then as we move to the east to LeClaire, that is signalized, but it has the challenge of having a utility structure just inside of the park. It's a pump station just inside off of the road, which interferes with access. And so, and then tracking in, the large center areas are parking, and then there's of course the boat launch down below with additional parking. So a couple other aspects, the site is served, it's well served by utilities, stormwater, domestic water, sanitary sewer, and electrical. And depending on where we put the park, we'll build off of those. Excuse me, depending on where we put the library within the park, we'll build off of those. The other major consideration that we have been factoring in is views and our views. And so there's a couple ways to think about this. The views can be seen as being outside of the park and looking in and seeing the library. And so that's just out on the main road where we're able to see. And there's only this one corner here at LeClaire where there's it's really not it's not established and large enough with the conflicts that I mentioned to have a building. And there's also parking challenges. But if you go further into the site, to where the boat launch is and to where the lower parking is, that site has sweeping views of the lake, and it has filtered views in and through. We're referring to that as the ridge site, and you can kind of see that. You can see that there, where the boat launch is. If you move to the west of that, it's into the center area. That's what we're calling the clearing, and that has good views down to the lake. There's some standing trees in the edge of the water, and there's a natural clearing there because some trees have come down over the years and created that natural clearing. There's also kind of, it's not a negative, but it's kind of like the less advantageous views are back into that armory. And it's not that it's intrusive, but it's what we're trying to do is have positive views out into nature. So as we swing further to the west, what we're calling the bluff site, those views really aren't of the lake. They're more of the forest and the surrounding wetlands. And so we see that as a positive. And then if we think about our environmental situation and the elements that are solar and wind, the idea of an east-west long axis of the building will be most advantageous. And that is here in Coos Bay, as it is just about anywhere on our planet. And what that allows is for the maximum solar gain without overheating the building or without creating glare. And of course, in a library reading room, that's exactly what you want. Natural light without being too bright or glary. So the design team is very much considering that. And we have wonderful light here in Coos Bay, right? Diffused light. Some days it's really bright, but most days it's that soft light. And then wind, the idea of acknowledging that the wind's coming from the north and northwest and not putting our portals there, not putting our entrances there that get hammered by the wind. But as David has said so many times, having the building shield us or dip its shoulder into the wind so that we have this really wonderful condition that the building creates outdoor spaces that we can use. We often refer to that as outdoor comfort. And then there's the pragmatic requirements of being at least 50 feet back from the water's edge with any of our architectural developments and the requirements for parking. In this case, we have about 50 automobiles that are required to be parked. We would not suggest that we would take any of the existing parking spaces away from the park. We contribute, but there is clearly an advantage to certain parts of the site So if there was an event that needed more than 50 spaces, you could utilize those at the park, especially in the evening when the parking is not well used for the park. So now let's talk a little bit about how these buildings, these building ideas could find themselves within Topits Park. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Charlie. One thing I'll add to what Charlie was saying, just because I think it jumps out probably to anybody that lives down there, that we're also very aware that the wind comes out of the southwest, in particular during the winter. And that little windrows chart that Charlie was showing you, that's actually out at the airport. And we suspect that the kind of microclimate up here at the lakes is a little bit different. So we're thinking about that. What I'm about to show you now and what we're going to share are 3 different sites that we have been looking at within that context. And Charlie already did a good job of introducing those. So I'm going to jump ahead here. And what I'm going to show you is first a location for a building and parking, and then talk about some of the first observations that we have as a team. And those are really just kind of conversation starters, so that when we kind of break off at the end of this, we can go to the boards and you can give us some feedback about what you think about these different sites. You'll have a whole bunch of other things to add to that and correct about it. So it's really just to get it started. So the first one I'm going to share is site study A, which we're calling the Bluff. And these are in no particular order. The white, by the way, is our property. So we can build within that. The dark gray shaded areas that you see are where the landscape is, the slope is too steep to allow us to build on. And so we took those out of contention. The dark red is the square footage that you would have to build to have a 2-story library. And the light red is the square footage you would have to have a 1-story library. And then the gray is obviously the parking, and the little orange triangle is where you might have an entry. So this first scheme has us coming off of Norman Avenue, and which Charlie said is a good, it's a good intersection. It's 4-way. It's not signalized. It would likely want to, get some improvements if we did add the library over here. We would take that entry road, and then we would actually have to cut in a new road into the park, which could follow the line of the existing trail more or less, but would require significant grading because that trail is too steep right now to get into that area. And it would cut right through some sensitive wetlands, which we would have to take on some remediation strategies to make up for that. The idea here, if you did build back here, was that you would put parking on the south side and the building on the north, so that the building could look out over, through the woods and kind of out with filtered views out to the lake. And I'm just going to jump through these here quickly and then open it up. So this one has relatively easy access off of Norman Avenue. The building is really immersed in the park experience, so patrons are really going to feel like they're in the woods, which could be wonderful. It will be challenging to build just from the amount of infrastructure you have to build to kind of get all the way deep back into the site. It will disturb wetlands. It doesn't have a great view of the lake if that was something that was desirable. The library is separated from the other developments that are already in the park. So, you just get the development kind of more dispersed throughout. It has limited access to daylight just because there is so much tree coverage there. And along with that means, we are going to have to take out a lot of trees to get it to fit in. It does have out of the 3, it's unique in the sense that it's close to this pedestrian access from Ackerman, if that was of interest to people. And because it is up on this bluff, it actually has pretty good soil conditions. The next site that we looked at was the clearing, which is really in the middle of the site, right behind the armory. It's really one of the flattest, broadest spaces on the whole site, free of steep slopes. It still slopes a little bit, but it's the flattest. The problem is it's also low and it has a lot of wetlands in it. The way it would work is that you would come in off of Hull Street, or we would figure out a way to take that signalized intersection at Leclerc and understand how we could possibly, maybe we could bring in a one-way and create a one-way loop with Hull. I'm sorry, whoops. Create a one-way loop with Hull to help deal with some of the traffic issues out here. And then you would have a road that would come off of, right now you drive in, there's some parking in front of the childcare, and you would kind of peel off to the left down this slope down into the wetlands area, and you'd be parking kind of down in there. And the building would be between the parking and the lake. Again, really kind of an immersive spot for the building, which is wonderful, but it does start to intrude a little bit on the experience of people kind of walking on the paths down by the lake. So filtered lake views. So it has filtered views of the lake. It has, it utilizes an area of the site where there aren't as many trees, so you wouldn't have to remove as many trees from the park to do it here. The vehicle access does impact wetlands. It's an immersive library experience. It's really close to the other park amenities. So I think we're saying that because for people coming to visit the park, you could be aware that the library is down there. And then you could take a path to kind of walk over there, say if you had parked over on the right, or if you've gone to the library on the left, obviously you're aware the park is there and you can walk over and maybe use the playground, things like that. So not directly accessible, but available. We do have to understand the traffic impact on Hull, as I mentioned. It does have a little bit better solar access because the trees are a little thinner there. It is obscured from the park entry. So like when you drive in, it is kind of down a hill through the woods. And it is a relatively flat site and is the site that would most easily accommodate a one-story building and the parking. The thing is, we did find out that it would be expensive to build down there because the soils are problematic. They're very sandy and require expensive foundations. The last and the third scheme that we developed for conversation is the Ridge. This is all the way on the east. It combines both the parking and the building along with and adds to the infrastructure that's already there along the middle lake, the middle arm of the lake. It suggests that the parking itself could actually be combined with that parking that's already there. That parking that's there could be restriped to also be more efficient. And so cumulatively, you wouldn't have to build as many spots because you'd be able to consider both of these and share the whole facility. The building itself could be in this orientation or rotated, but either way, it would have views out to the lake and as well as some filtered views kind of back into the woods. And so here are some of those kind of observations to get the conversation going. It has really high visibility for people kind of arriving into the park. It is very close to the other facilities. So, people coming to use one thing will be aware that the other thing is there and very easily, they don't even have to go get back in their car or walk anywhere. It's right there. Same traffic impact on Hull as the other scheme. Really expansive, great views of the lake. And as part of that, it also has good access to daylight and solar. The shared parking opportunities, the fact that the Ridge is there, if you were to do a two-story library, it means that there's an opportunity for both levels of the library to be able to open out at grade. The height of the Ridge is pretty much one story of library, so there are some potentials there. It has minimal impact to wetlands, and obviously it has really good soil for building and is really close to the pedestrian access for where people already are coming from, and could be a great kind of gateway to kind of invite you to kind of go out and explore the trails. So that's a lot of information we've just thrown at you. And I think, Laura, if you just want to touch on next steps, then we could kind of, then we could break out and start having some conversations.
Sure, yeah. Or if there's any burning questions that you want David to address, you can come up to the podium and ask them, or we can end the kind of presentation phase and move on to the boards and kind of break up. Is there anyone that has any questions for the group? Okay. Well, so one of the things you can see from our earlier meeting, the ideas of the boards is that you use the sticky notes and add any comments to any of the boards, and there's some boards out in the hallway as you came in. Also, if you see a comment or you see an image or there's a thought or some writing that really resonates, maybe one of the priorities that's really important to you, you can kind of endorse it by adding a dot to it. If you see somebody else's comment that you really like, instead of rewriting it, if you endorse it, that tells us that more people are thinking the same thing. And then over there, there's a few hearts. If each person could be limited to 2 hearts, that's for things that you really, really like. And you want to leave the fact that you're kind of super endorsing them. So with that, we can break up the meeting and we're here for questions or comments. We'd love to talk to you.
And Laura, did you want to talk about next steps?
Well, I sort of mentioned it before, but we will be coming back to after tonight. We're hopefully going to land on one of the options for the location, and then we'll start designing the library at that site. So as David said, the shape there is just a placeholder. We'll be configuring it in various ways, showing you in the next meeting different layouts, different forms that the library can take. So that's the next step, and then we'll be working through the schedule, but that's the next time we'll be meeting with the public. Okay, well, thanks, David.
Thank you, everyone.